I swear these other podcasts are just a waste of time. I'm skipping through them, I'd rather listen and change my mind. Wes and Nick always help me through my daily grind. Your favorite guys, your favorite lines, change my mind. I swear these other podcasts are just a waste of time. I'm skipping through them, I'd rather listen and change my mind. Wes and Nick always help me through my daily grind. Your favorite guys, your favorite lines, change my mind.
Yeah. No Wes still. So that means we talk more comics themselves.
Is he still married?
He's still married based on the pictures that I saw.
Good.
So I'm very happy for him, yes. You're listening to the Change My Mind podcast. This is episode, I think we're on number 35.
Eventually you have to stop numbering them and just not even worry about it.
Oh, really? Oh, Wes has been not numbering them for a while. I numbered the last one just because he hadn't done it. I thought you told me that you're supposed to number things because people like...
You do like when you write out the descriptions and everything, but you don't have to say it on the air.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm normally not the one that introduces the show because...
Generally, when you watch a TV show, they're not like, this is episode 47.
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah, I guess so.
But then you might see it in the description as being,
Yes.
season 1, episode 4.
You almost always see it in the description. And normally I have a graphic T-shirt on, too, for those watching on the 1420 WBSM YouTube stream, but... I came straight from work today, but you got us covered today. You're the one that has a spooky South Coast shirt.
Yeah, just a spooky South Coast shirt.
I like that, though. It's a pretty cool design. I'm assuming you did not do that yourself.
No, these were from Dark Side Ink and Fall River. These are collector's items, no longer available.
Oh, very fancy. Okay.
Not fancy, just 10 years old.
10 years old? Really? That thing's 10 years old?
Yeah, 2009 we got them made.
Considering you're the one that made it's yours, it's in pretty damn good condition for something 10 years old. I would think that'd be worn out by now.
No
holes in it?
The folks at Dark Side Ink do a fantastic job. The only holes in it, I have a hole in the back from where my screen door bit me because my screen door rips out all of my shirts.
Okay.
And then there's a couple along the neck where I think a mouse chewed my shirt.
Okay, that sounds more okay. That makes more sense.
But the quality of the product is it's fantastic.
Yeah,
that's why I told you if you had to get physical shirts made, if you didn't want to just go through the websites to do it, and you wanted to actually have like physical stock, Dark Side Ink and Fall River, they're you guys.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind for sure. This week we're going to be talking about some comic stuff because Tim and I like to get that out of the way when Wes is not here. Not out of the way, but we just can't really get into it because he does not read them like Tim used to a ton and like I do fairly often now. But there is one bit of news that we want to take a look at. So apparently, Jonah Hill is rumored to be in talks with Matt Reeves' the Batman movie to appear in it. I guess Jeffrey Wright is going to be. Who is it? Yeah, he's in talks to play Commissioner Gordon,
which is a good casting.
I'm fine with that. But Jonah Hill he'd have to be the Penguin if he's going to be in this thing, right? I can't imagine he'd take on any other role, and I don't really want to see him in any other role.
It all depends on which Jonah Hill we're dealing with. Is he fat Jonah Hill right now, or is he skinny Jonah Hill right now?
I think he's kind of in the middle Jonah Hill, so would that make him skinny fat Jonah Hill? Yeah, that is a thing, but...
I mean...
I don't, but...
There's not a lot of great Batman villains that we haven't seen on screen yet, so it's going to have to be a rehash.
Let me put it to you this way, though. I want nothing to do with Jonah Hill as a villain. It's got to be the Penguin, in my opinion.
Maybe Riddler if he's on the skinnier side.
What is he going to do as the Riddler?
I don't want him to be him. I'm just saying like that might be what they're casting.
Well, I guess the people who've been rumored are Joker, Riddler, Scarecrow, Penguin, Bane, Poison Ivy, Catwoman, and Ra's al Ghul.
For the movie, not for Jonah Hill.
For the movie, yes.
Okay.
No. I don't think he's going to play Poison Ivy. I saw that, was it Rihanna I guess there were rumors that she was going to play Poison Ivy. She stomped on those. I wouldn't have minded seeing her in that role. I think that would have worked well, but I don't want any part of Jonah. I'm not a big Jonah Hill guy just in general. Like, yeah, he was fine in, what's that movie? The Superbad. But outside of that, man, even then I want to kind of punch him in the face. I always find him really annoying, really obnoxious for no reason, and I think that's why people find him funny.
I liked it on the 21 Jump Street movies.
I never understood.
Those are pretty funny.
I thought those were so overrated. I didn't find those that funny at all.
It's because I had such low expectations.
And you know what? I'm willing to bet you're in the same camp as everybody else there. I didn't have expectations going into it either. I was just like, okay, this is definitely one of those movies where it's like, all right, it's there. I don't really care outside of that. No, I'm not rewatching that. Although I'm sure if you like it, that's very rewatchable. Not for me, though.
Well, that's because you have no connection to the original series. So
I guess that would make a big difference. And Johnny Depp was in the original series, right? Because he made a cameo at the end, right?
Him and Peter DeLuise, who are the two, like, kind of the main stars.
Is Peter DeLuise in something else?
No, I don't think he's done anything since 21 Jump Street.
Okay, because I
actually think he retired from acting.
Really?
Yeah, so he
just came back for that.
He's from, I don't know if you're familiar with Dom DeLuise.
Yes, I am familiar with Dom DeLuise.
I'm sure you've seen All Dogs Go to Heaven. And
Yep.
So,
oh, yeah, for sure. I love that movie.
Dom DeLuise, was his father, and, him and his brother were actors too, and I think they both kind of, did it because their dad did it and then decided that it wasn't really for them.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm guessing.
Fair enough. That was really it for news this week. We're not doing drinking buddies or anything like that. Tim and I are just going to get straight into the comics. So, Tim grew up reading comics in the 90s primarily, right? Because you were born...
Mostly the 80s,
Mostly
actually.
the 80s.
Yeah.
So, what year were you born? Was it 78? Oh, okay. My bad. So you got mostly the 80s.
So I'll tell you the story of how I started reading comic books for the first time.
This is even better than it is more of a gap than I realized, because I read them, I would say, late 90s. Then I stopped for a long time, and I've gotten back into them more now. But I've gotten a good feel for the 90s and the aughts, I guess. But the stuff I read primarily is from the 2010s, I would say.
So when I was 5 years old...
Are you doing that old man thing with your mouth for emphasis?
No, I was drinking a cup of tea.
Okay.
So when I was 5 years old, so we're talking 1983, I lived in an apartment in a house in Brockton, Massachusetts, right across the street from a corner store, BJ's Variety Store. Because you went down to the corner to get your BJ's Variety Store.
Oh, okay. Is it the same BJ's that they have now in Dartmouth?
No. Oh, it was like a little corner store.
Gotcha.
And so
you go around back?
No, it was right out on the street, right on the corner.
Okay.
So when you walked into this store, it had like a deli and like all these other little things. What New York people would call a bodega, I think, right? Bodega. Anyway,
yeah, I think so.
But it has all that element to it. But right by the front door was one of those spinny racks with the sign on the top that says comics. Mm-hmm. And they had comic books there. And being 5 years old, I had just learned how to read. And not being a normal kid, the first thing that I read was a novelization of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom or something like that.
Okay.
Like I was reading books or trying to. And so
very underrated how difficult that can be sometimes for a child.
Right. I mean, I don't think that I could make perfect sense of it, but I was just going through and looking for words that I recognized.
At 5 years old, obviously, it's very different. But I mean, like, I don't know. I always had a tough time. My mind wanders. So it's just like I would be reading something and it's like, oh, look at that. Like, just out of nowhere.
I had kids' books.
Daydream.
I wasn't interested in the kids' books because I liked, action. I liked, heroes and stuff like that. So
not dogs and cats.
Across the street at the store, I think it was my dad, either my dad or my mom, but I'm pretty sure it was my dad. Thought, how about a comic book? And I bought a Spider-Man comic book, which I think was probably 10 cents at the time, and took it home and read my first comic book cover to cover, and I read it again and again and again, and I loved it. But, only getting the one, I didn't know, like, where the story went or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So that kind of started me off with loving comics, and I would pick up ones here and there, find, like, the Archie comics and stuff like that. Wherever you could get them for cheap.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was in third grade, and I have to thank my friend Luke Tengren, who introduced me to comics as a hobby and as a something that you can collect.
More than what you were doing. Yeah, for sure.
And so from there, I became a pretty serious comic reader and a decent collector for a number of years.
Okay.
I have the typical, mom threw away the comic book collection story.
It's the worst. That's absolute
but
worst.
She didn't throw away my whole collection.
Did she throw away the best ones, though?
She threw away X-Men #3, the first appearance of Juggernaut.
No.
Not that it was in mint condition, but I'd probably be sitting on a couple of $100 today at least.
Yeah.
And I put it on top of the cabinet in my kitchen so that nobody would ever find it. I basically didn't want my sisters to know that I had something valuable, so that if they got mad, they couldn't wreck it on me.
Right.
Put it up there. And I guess my mom found it while putting, you put contact paper up there so if there's any dead flies or anything, you can wipe them off.
Oh, no.
And so I think she found it up there and was like, wow, what's this doing up there? And just tossed it.
Oh, geez. That's what she got to ask you, man.
But
That's brutal.
I had a collection of, like I said, a pretty good collection for being that age. And I had, maybe like 10, 11 years old. I had a couple of long boxes full of different comics.
Okay.
And I made the stupidest move that I'd ever made in my life. This is the time when Alf came out. Alf was a huge show, and it was my favorite show.
Yes.
And they came out with a comic series of Alf. And my friend Luke Tengren, the aforementioned Luke Tengren, had subscribed to Alf because his dad used to let him get all the subscriptions, or his mom, whoever. They used to let him subscribe to all kinds of comics, and like literally delivered to his house.
Wow.
And so
that's how it worked back then?
Yeah.
Did not know that. Okay. I didn't know
I think it still does work that way. I think you still can get them delivered to your house.
Really?
You don't have to go to the comic book shop to get them.
I'd rather go to the store anyways.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Most people would, but you could get them delivered to your house. They would come in a tube or a flat envelope.
It'd be weird. I find that it'd be strange to do it now, though. I feel like it's a waste. Have it delivered to the comic store. You get it digitally. That's it. I wouldn't even make it an option.
Right, but
anyway,
it was definitely a thing then.
Okay.
And then so he subscribed to Alf. It was going to be the first 9 issues or whatever. We made a deal. I traded him a whole bunch of comics that I had in my collection in exchange for he would get the Alf subscription, read the issue, and then give them to me.
Okay.
So that was the deal that we worked out. But the stack of comics that I gave him probably did not equal the value of the subscription to Alf. One of the comics that was included in there was the Fantastic Four, where they go back in time to try to kill Hitler.
Oh.
Yeah, probably the only Fantastic Four that has any collectible value. So that one was in there.
Tim.
And
that happens.
But a lot of the rest of them were like generic stuff, like some Captain Americas that I didn't care for because I didn't like Captain America anyway.
Right.
And
oh God, he must have been really boring back then.
some Hulks. I wasn't a big Hulk guy.
I get why guys why people like the Hulk, but it's never been for me. You're more of a She-Hulk person, anyways.
Yeah, I liked She-Hulk, but then I got back into collecting in the 90s.
Okay.
When it really became... See, when I was collecting comics in the 80s, it was literally collecting them just to have them. Like, they didn't have value.
But in the 90s, that was the big boom.
In the 90s, that's when the collectability came into play.
Right.
The variant covers and the die cuts and all that stuff.
So many friggin' variant covers. It's
so when all that started, I started collecting again. And I had a Foot Locker that I kept full of not only comics, but other things that I had of value. I had some pieces of the Berlin Wall in there. I had, I used to cut stuff out of magazines that I thought was kind of like important to hold on to, like, without making a scrapbook. I just put it like in an envelope. What else did I have? I had the first series of the Marvel trading cards. That they had come out with. I had a bunch of those. I had the hologram Venom.
There's some pretty good ones out there.
The hologram Venom was the card everybody wanted.
Oh, and you had it?
And I had one of those. I went out and I bought it. There used to be Bob's Cards and Comics next to the Buzzards Bay Theater.
Okay.
And that's where I would go and do all my business. So I was waiting and waiting and waiting to save up the $5 to be able to buy that card.
So I didn't have a comic store growing up as a kid. I had a few spots that I would see. Like there was one, I want to say there was a place in New Bedford. It was like some random little hole in the wall place, not far from like the Building 19 used to be. I don't know what it was. It was definitely straight up a comic store.
Well, Looney Tunes was when you were younger. Looney Tunes was a pretty popular
Maybe that's
spot.
what it was.
There was a New England Comics in New Bedford.
It might have been. There's this place in New Bedford still that
I think it's still in New England Comics.
Is it?
I think so.
But it might have been a different location. But I mean, this place was not like, it didn't seem all that well organized compared to what I see now. Like the New England Comics that's in New Bedford is a pretty nice little spot.
The other place to go, there used to be a comic book store in the Dartmouth Mall.
There are two now.
Where they've expanded the theater. There was a store there, and that's where when Superman died.
I don't remember that one. Was it in the 90s?
Yeah, between the food court and where the theater is, there was a comic book store in that area, and
I don't remember that at all.
That's where I got that's where I went every week to get the Death of Superman series. Well, as each issue came out.
Yeah, when it came out. Yeah.
And I remember that's also where I got the Nightfall comics when Bane broke Batman's back. So yeah, that was kind of the place to go too. But Bob's was my go-to place because I lived I lived close enough that I just rode my bike down there.
There was another place on the Cape that I went to. It was like the country. There was a place in Brewster because my grandparents had a house in Brewster, and we used to go there every once in a while. And they'd have that old school like thing you were talking about where you put all the comics on, but I felt like they didn't update it very often. It felt like I would go once a week, and it's like it's the same thing. It's like where are the new comics? I never see anything different.
See, when I was a kid, you had to go to New England Comics because that's the only place you could get the Tick.
Really?
It was exclusive to New England Comics.
Really?
Yeah, it was done by local Massachusetts people, I think. I'd have to go back and dig into the history of the Tick, but that was the only place you could get it.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, like all the comic books that you would get that had like ads for other comics, they always had an ad for New England Comics in them, so that you could order the Tick, so that people from around the country could read the Tick, even though they couldn't get to a local New England comic store.
Didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was, that was the kind of the place to go, but, also it was kind of hard because, you had to walk in there with $20, $30 to be able to get everything that you were going to see. It's different. Most of my comic buying came from the flea market.
Really?
There was always multiple...
Dude, now even still, they got some good ones.
There was always multiple tables.
The one in Raynham.
My dad, when I was a kid, he would work at flea markets. He worked for an auto parts company, and he would buy out all the stock, the leftover stock of things that they didn't want. He would just buy all that out and fill up a van and go to flea markets and sell it all, for just a little bit over what he paid. And so he would do very, very well with that. And usually if I helped him out, I would get a couple bucks for the day. It was like $5 a day was
Yep.
And so what I would do is I would take that $5 and I would go around to all the different places where they had comics. And so I couldn't go and buy, like the important comics that were hanging in the poly bags on the side of somebody's van.
No, but you get the ones the characters you like and all that. Yeah.
What I would do is I would go into the long boxes where it was like a quarter a comic.
Oh.
And I would go through and be like, that looks cool, that looks cool, that looks cool. So when I get into my list of some of the comics that I enjoyed, you might not even recognize some of the names of the things I'm going to talk about.
Oh, okay. And see, and that's where I struggled as a kid, where I kind of fell out of it. Now, part of it was the obsession I had with sports and everything, and it kind of pulled me away from reading stuff that wasn't sports related or school related. But I lost interest in it, but I came back to it, because I learned how to relax a little bit more in life. And the other thing was the art. Oh man, the art now to me is the biggest difference. I think the writing is improved a lot through the years, but I think it's like anything else. But the art that I see now, I look back at my brother loves the old stuff, like before you were born. He loves the old, Jack Kirby and all that. That's his stuff. I just can't. I respect it. I know it's important. And I know, I'll go and defend the first X-Men and the Spider-Man and stuff like that.
It is harder to get into.
Yeah, it's just not as it's not as cool looking. That's why McFarlane, I appreciate him so much for changing the game.
McFarlane, Liefeld, and Lee. The three of them together.
And Lee. See, I have McFarlane and Lee. I hold on a different. I know Lee, how important Liefeld is, but it's just I put him slightly below the two of them. And I think the biggest problem is I know everybody makes jokes about how he can't draw feet. I can't stand how he can't draw lips. That annoys the hell out of me.
Well, but the three of them together, and everybody's like, "Oh, Image Comics made the difference," and it did. Image Comics was
huge.
It was kind of the seismic shift. But
I'm reading The Darkness now, and Silvestri's art is outstanding.
But the stuff that those three guys were doing for Marvel, for DC, whoever they were working for, the stuff that they were doing was already groundbreaking. And Amazing Spider-Man number 300 to me is the big bang of the 1990s comic boom.
Really?
Yep.
I think that's fair.
You had the McFarlane cover.
Yep.
You had the different kind of take on Spider-Man right out there front and center. Mm-hmm. And from there, that was when we started to say, we need better art. We want better art.
Oh, man.
We want more focus on the characters instead of the backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, is that what that was? It was the focus on the backgrounds?
It's just, if you look at some of these old panels, there was a lot of stuff going on. And there wasn't a lot of close-up shots.
I want the detail in the characters. I want someone to look more jacked. I want their actions to be more fluid. I want everything they do. That's one thing I heard about McFarlane. He always said, I heard him say something. It was about his artwork. It was whenever you show a character about punching another character, you always show the follow through, and you always over exaggerated, or you show like right when they're about to load up. You don't show the in between because it's not as cool. Like, and you gotta really over embellish it. Everything.
One of the advantages that there is now that wasn't in those days too, though, is computer assistance. And as much as the artists like to say, well, I don't use computers, it doesn't matter. The people that are producing the comics are using computers too.
Right.
So it helps to be able to say, okay, we can kind of make these generic backgrounds and not spend time working on them, and kind of put all of our attention and focus into the detail in the character.
Yeah.
And I think that there was, a couple of books when I was a kid, literal books, that made a difference, I think, in the next generation of comic book artists. One was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Okay.
Which is still, anybody that wants to draw and wants to be a comic artist, you have to have that book. And there was
Do you have it? Because you liked art?
I did when I was a kid. I don't have it anymore.
Okay.
And then there was a series of books when I was younger called Draw 50. And so it would be draw 50 farm animals, draw 50 vehicles, draw 50 something or other. And one of them was draw 50 superheroes.
Oh.
And it would show you the process of how to draw the figure, how to put the definition in, the muscle tone, kinetic movement, all that kind of stuff. And I think those two books coming out when I was younger influenced those guys. And that kind of helped them say, we can go beyond what Kirby did, and we can take this into a whole new level of art.
I saw recently Neil Gaiman had... there's like all these different celebrities, successful people have these courses that they teach online. I forget what it's called. Steph Curry has one though too for basketball. I've seen McFarlane do some stuff on Instagram where he shows different art, and how to draw different body parts, things like that. He's outstanding at teaching it. He should have one of those courses too, because I think it would make a huge difference with some artists. But going back to what you were saying, I think I'm sure that had a huge difference, made a huge impact. And I do think with certain artists now too, like my favorite is Dexter Soy. I've said it a million times. No one draws Red Hood better than that guy does, and he's obviously he's my favorite character. He has some hints of it's manga, right? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
He has some hints of manga in his art. I mean, it's not like that's not what he draws.
That was also a big influence though too.
That I think is huge too, because you get these characters who their faces are a little bit more like edged, like the edges are sharper and everything. Not to the point where it's like Pokemon, where that's straight up manga, but it's like it's similar to that. And I think that they're like ideally, but at the same time, I think it matters with each character too. Like I like Sean Murphy's artwork. Sean Murphy is totally different than Dexter Soy. Like I like him drawing Constantine. I like the way he draws Batman for White Knight, and oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on the new one. Curse of the White Knight. It's a different story. It's a different feel of Batman. I like the grit with that. And I think that's important too. And I don't know if that was always the case with the comics that you grew up with. I know with the 90s ones that I remember, it wasn't really like that, where the art accurately represented the character and his emotions or her emotions.
I think that as they've developed more and more, they've found, new ways to improve upon what the people before them have done. You mentioned, the Japanese influence, that came into play. Anime has been around forever. And
how long is forever, would you say? Since you were a kid?
There was anime shows in the 1960s that we were getting in America.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the Speed Racer.
Oh, right, yeah.
Just shows like that were kind of starting to influence people more and more. But they became bigger with Generation X. They mattered more. My parents watched Speed Racer when they were kids, but kids of my generation cared more about it than my parents did.
Okay.
So there was a lot more of that Japanese influence coming in. And then in the 80s, we had Voltron, we had Robotech. We had these series that, were unlike anything we'd ever seen, which is kind of influencing some of the art. But also, the rise of comic book shops helps, because now you're getting import comics that you wouldn't have been able to have seen otherwise. You're never going to walk into the drugstore and see a Japanese import hanging on that rack, that spinning rack. But you're going to go into a comic book shop and say, hey, what do you have that's new and different? And they're going to say, here. And they're going to pull out some of that stuff. Or, another big thing that came up in the 90s was the rise of Blockbuster Video.
Right.
and you could walk into a Blockbuster Video and they had an anime section.
Right.
You could never find that if you went into a regular video store.
Oh, okay.
So all these influences are converging upon people that are interested in art and helping to kind of broaden their perspectives of, so that they're not just going to be a Jack Kirby, John Romita, clone of following those people that came before them.
Right.
They're going to develop their own style with a lot of different influences coming into play.
And I'm sure when we look at I don't know how much more the art can grow in 10, 20 years, but you're going to see some different perspectives that we're not used to seeing even now. But one thing that I think is so there's the art that's developed, and yeah, it's important to have what you had, and then you have the McFarlane, Liefeld, and Lee era, and other guys like Silvestri. But I think the big thing for me, we see the storytelling. We get the Marvel and the DC primarily, but Image has a ton. You have Saga, which is like this like sci-fi, what is it? Soap opera kind of thing. No One Left to Fight, the one that I've been talking about a lot with Dark Horse Comics. It's 2 issues in. It's got kind of the drama soap opera element to it as well. There's a lot going on. And I feel like now what's great about, I don't know if they had this back then, but I feel like with comics for you always back then, everybody was built like similar to Captain America or Thor. Everybody was huge. Even now the heroes, my favorite heroes, are not built like that. They're chiseled, sleek. It's different, and the storytelling's different with each one too. Like you wouldn't have Red Hood back then. I'm going with my own experience. Yeah, of course.
And with my own kind of what I read.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what kind of took away some of that need to have the superhero physique in all your characters, I think that Frank Miller played a big part in that. Because Frank Miller with his stylization, you didn't have to have these big, bulky superheroes, especially when he was drawing Batman or Daredevil. You still have the muscular tone, but you didn't have these big, hulking figures.
Yeah, Daredevil definitely not. Yeah,
they weren't
one of the
having
reasons why I liked him so much.
Superman physique,
right?
And I think another part of it, and it was Frank Miller that was involved with this too, because I believe Frank Miller, if I remember right, drew Punisher #1. When Punisher finally got his own series.
I'll double check that for you.
I'm 90% positive it was either Frank Miller or John Romita that drew Punisher #1. And I'm talking the one where he's outside of an apartment window on the fire escape with the gun. So it's the real
being a pain.
It's the real series. It's not the mini series. There was a mini series before that. But this is around the time when we started to see kind of the softening of the main characters in terms of their physique and their build. And this is right around the time when McFarlane came into Spider-Man and started drawing Spider-Man more streamlined than he was muscular.
Okay. I'm still trying to find the Punisher one artist. But you were just saying about McFarlane and how he changed things and everything with his interpretation of Spider-Man?
It really was.
So his growing up as a kid, I got introduced to it more so by the animated series, and that's kind of where I got the interest in comics as a kid, whether it was that Batman or the X-Men. And he had the bigger eyes then too. But I always remember, when I think of Spider-Man and what he looks like, I think of McFarlane's interpretation of him with those big eyes. That is my Spider-Man. And then when they had him like that in Raimi's Spider-Man, it's like, okay, this is exactly what he should look like. He has the same.
It was Romita, by the way.
It was Romita.
Yeah.
Okay, but he has those same bug eyes that I'm used to seeing. So when I saw I can't remember Garfield's look as well, but I feel like it wasn't too far off from that. But when I saw Tom Holland's, and it was like, man, those eyes aren't that big.
Right.
I know everybody else liked it. I wasn't. That was one of the things that really annoyed me at first. Like, where are those big ass eyes that I'm used to?
And if I remember right, I think we've actually had arguments about the armpit webbing.
We actually haven't. We've alluded to talking about it a ton. I don't know if.
No, I remember being in the car, like on the way to a Patriots game, arguing about the armpit webbing.
We have definitely discussed it in that regard. Yes, and that's something. So I think Wes and you are in the same camp.
I'm against it.
You're against having it in.
No, I'm talking about the armpit webbing.
I'm sorry. I got hung up on the wrist web. You're against.
I don't like the cartridge. I like the natural webbing.
Yeah,
I don't want them to run out.
Yeah, I'm about the natural webbing too. That's Wes is on the other side. That's the story for another
But
day.
I do remember us fighting about the armpit webbing.
You're against it.
I think it's stupid.
Why do you think it's stupid?
Because it's unnecessary.
How is it unnecessary? I mean, you saw how it helps him kind of like float a little bit.
It wouldn't really do that in real life, though.
Well, what if he runs out of webbing? I think he would do it. And if he's trying to go from one spot to another, and if he's
But
like
it wouldn't,
dropping in,
it wouldn't work. Like, the physics of it wouldn't work.
Why?
Because it's mostly whole.
Okay, do you think that he just... So what did he...
Make yourself...
Don't you think it would have looked a little bit probably differently in real life then?
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
You know those nets? You know, the rope netting?
Yeah, rope netting.
All right, you know what? Even take a basketball hoop.
Okay.
Okay, put basketball hoops under your arms.
It's not going to do anything.
And jump off the roof.
The holes are not that big. Those holes are not that big. And
In the armpit webbing?
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
They're not as big as a basketball hoop's netting.
It still wouldn't make a difference.
It
does not give him a gliding effect.
I mean, how often did he glide in the comics anyways?
So again, unnecessary. Looks stupid.
I don't think it looks stupid, though. It looks fine.
Batman. Spider-Man with armpit webbing is like a woman with unshaved armpits to me.
Oh, that's a real turnoff right there. That's for sure. I mean, I don't think I think my take on it more is like, what's the issue, as opposed to he should have it absolutely, because I'm not as big a Spider-Man guy as you are. But I do remember. I can't remember in the animated series. I feel like he didn't have it. Did he not have it in the animated series?
He may have had it.
Either way, I just don't look at it. I look at it and say, yeah, it's fine, whatever. He doesn't have a cape.
I do know he had it in the 60s series.
He had it in the 60s series. So he had it at his inception.
Yes, the original version of Spider-Man had the armpit webbing.
Okay.
I don't want to get bogged down to that.
No, that's fine.
McFarlane definitely did not put the armpit webbing in.
He did not put it in. Okay. I mean, the bug eyes on Spider-Man. I can't say it enough. Like that's those are the kind of things like early on where I'm like, this is what I want out of the art, not the Jack Kirby stuff. No disrespect.
And not just the fact that they were larger than before, like they were taking up the whole mask.
Oh yeah. And then his jaw was just like way more defined, way more chiseled. I just felt like some characters just like, these are heroes. These are not they're not realistic. As much as I don't need them all to look like Superman necessarily, they should look like different than us.
But Spider-Man shouldn't, because Spider-Man is just a regular everyday guy. But what we saw with the development of the McFarlane Spider-Man was, you're like, okay, you can be like regular plain old human being Peter Parker, but after 10 years of being Spider-Man,
you're not just regular.
You're gonna get into a certain type of physical shape doing all the stuff that he does.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense.
At the very least, let's take away the spider powers. Let's just say that you went out and did parkour every night for 10 years.
That would make a difference.
It's going to have an effect on your physical appearance.
Maybe I should start doing that. If I can look like Spider-Man, I would do that. Nah, I won't do that. No shot in hell.
Put some basketball hoops under your arm if you do that. Some basketball nets.
Because then I can fly at least, right?
At least it'll help glide a little bit when you fall.
I will say, if I was to pick a superpower, it would probably be... I'm always between Wolverine's, like claws, but they'd have to be the adamantium claws.
Well, the claws aren't really a power.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what are they then? It's a deformation?
It's an enhancement.
Okay, fine. I mean, well, the bone claws are not an enhancement. That's part of what he is. And then but I mean, the healing with all, like, that whole thing, that whole package. But I also love, Spider-Man, when he has the actual webs in his wrist, not the shooters.
Right.
I think that's one of the coolest powers ever, because you could just mess around with that all day long. Living in a city, that'd be the best ever. But anyways, when it comes to the stuff now, like I said, I love how there's so many different types of stories and there's stuff for everybody out there. Now, I like to dip my toes into stories that I may not normally, like, that wouldn't necessarily normally appeal to me. I haven't read Saga yet. I have it waiting on my coffee table at home. I still haven't finished Darkness yet, and because I've been trying to catch up on everything else that I got to read, whether it's the new X-Men series going on and whatever else I got to review on a week-to-week basis. But when it comes to now, that is, I think, one of the biggest things. At the same time, I would say the biggest knock on this stuff now is where you guys in your generation, or maybe I guess the 90s, you had way too many variant covers. I feel like now they really try and throw too much crap against the wall. And it's just like, we're going to throw this out there and that out there. And we're going to give this person a series and that person. It's like, why don't you really spend time and figure out who works. You know what I mean? I know there's so many artists and writers out there, but come on.
I'm all for every character having their own series if they think that it's worth it.
If it's worth it. Though.
I don't like it when it's 50 different lines for the same character.
That's Batman. That's Spider-Man. Which by the way, I heard the Abrams one. So I guess J.J. Abrams' son is a kid. Didn't know that. And I guess it was, I saw comicbook.com, not a fan of it. I guess it was brutal. So there you go. But anyways, yes, the million.
That's the problem is like if you came into the Marvel universe by watching the movies and you're like, I really like Spider-Man. I think I'd like to read Spider-Man comic books. Good luck figuring out what's going on where. And I don't know if they still do it the way they used to do it, but when they had, when I was a kid, there was 3 Spider-Man titles and that was too many. And they would cross over. So the same storylines were going through all 3 titles. So you had to buy all 3 series to be able to figure out what was going on.
I don't like, they did with Spider-Man?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I mean, I understand when they do a whole universe thing, and even then that's still kind of annoying. But to do that for just one, oh man, like that's why I like the standalone stuff. That's why I like standalone movies because like it's contained and you just know one direction you're going in. I don't mind events, but it just gets to be too much. They got like an event going on right now with DC, the Year of the Villain. It's like it's too much. It's like you're messing up with Red Hood now, and now he's like teaching kids, and then you got Deathstroke, and he's in this whole mess going. I mean, I will say actually kind of like what's going on with Deathstroke right now, but there's a whole mess going on there. They all got to be intertwined. It's like, come on.
And that's where you lose people.
Yeah, it is where you lose people. You don't gain people. You think you're going to go and get all this money, and that's another one I would say. There's a lot of events right now.
If all you care about is digital, pushing them out digitally, that model will work fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're also only getting people at $9.99 a month.
Yeah.
As opposed to going out and buying, 10 different books a month.
And that's what I do now, but it's like it gets complicated with this.
Right, and people, casual fans or new fans aren't going to buy into that model.
No. The problem is though, Tim, like we're in an event-based society now where you have these things and it's like this is huge and this is the stuff that you can turn into movies and all that. It's great.
There was a brief period of time where I had a folder at Bob's Cards and Comics. That's what you did. You had a folder. And if you had a folder at your favorite comic book shop, when the titles came in that you wanted, they would put them into your folder.
They don't call it a pull list? That's what we call it now.
No, they were literally manila folders.
Okay.
And so you would go into Bob's and you'd show up on Tuesday, because that's when the comics came out then. And you would go on Tuesday afternoon and he would pull your folder for you. And you would have X amount of comics that you had to buy. And if you were spending $18, $20 on all the comics that were in your folder, and that's all you had to spend on comics, it eliminates the possibility of being able to just walk around the shelf and being like, what else can I spend this last $4 I have on? Mm-hmm. So you never find anything new. Mm-hmm. You get wrapped up into those stories, and then maybe they introduce a character in one of those books that you say, okay, I'm going to go and follow this character somewhere else. But generally, you lose the ability of being able to walk in and just wander around and be like, let me try this, let me try that.
Yeah, and that's something I feel like, with DC, they had the New Age of Heroes. And I'm sure you remember early on in the show, I was talking a lot about the Silencer. She was the one that lasted the longest. But the only out of that initiative, but the only reason that I read that, Tim, was because all right, I have all these DC comics at my disposal that I can read and try and review something different. Well, let's pick one out of here. And it's like, okay, this character looks the coolest. If I was just reading, I wouldn't go and look at the Silencer. I wouldn't have spent, I'm not going to spend my money on that. What do I know about the character? She's not introduced. She's barely introduced in Nightwing, I think. That was it.
And that's why I have to also complain about the price of books too.
That's brutal. Now,
what are you paying for a single title? The average title.
The average one I believe is $3.99, or is it $4.99 now? I think it's $4.99 for DC and $3.99 for Marvel.
So that's why I stopped reading Mad Magazine. It's because it started costing me $5 an issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I stopped reading
a week?
Most magazines. No, monthly.
Monthly, okay.
That's why I stopped reading most magazines, was because they got up to about $5 an issue, and it's too much.
I don't mind if it's worth it. I mean, there's a certain point where it's a breaking point.
No, but one of the things that I subscribed to for years was ESPN the magazine.
Yep.
And it just progressively got thinner and thinner and thinner as the price got to be more and more and more. And the only reason I kept my account, I kept my subscription for so long is because it was tied into my Insider account.
Oh, okay.
You know, back in the old days when they launched the magazine, if you were an ESPN insider, they would give you the magazine as part of your insider account.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept my insider account for a long time, and when I got rid of it, then I was no longer grandfathered into that magazine deal.
Makes sense.
But it kept getting thinner and thinner and thinner to the point that I didn't even bother reading it anymore.
Well, I mean, if that's how it's going to work, then I don't want any part of that. And that's where I will say we've talked about like the length of reading the comic, because for you should, 30 minutes when you were a kid?
Yeah, we get like a 24-page book.
It's still that same length now. There's less ads in it, so I mean, I'm sure you'd appreciate that.
But there's more single page panels now.
Yes.
Whereas opposed to when we were reading them, it was very rare to get a splash page. It was very rare to get a page where there was, even 2 panels to a page. We had quarter panels, or we had, in actuality, you'd get eighths or even 12ths.
I still can't get over how it doesn't matter if it was your generation, the one in between us, or mine, how when they get to the center page, or where they have these pages where it's like, like the full page splash, whatever, it's still like you get you gotta know like where to stop at the center of the page, because I'm missing stuff, or I really gotta like angle the book right so I can get all the text. It's so friggin' annoying. It's like there's a binding there. How do you guys not know that's there?
When I was a kid, most of the time, the dead center was the prime ad space. So there was always ads in that middle area.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't get a lot. Usually for us, the splash page was, you opened up the book, you had your first page, then you flipped that over. 2 and 3 were your splash.
Oh, okay.
So you didn't really get a lot of,
I guess
mid-book stuff.
I think it still happens. I think it still happens. I actually never really paid attention. I guess I never really paid attention for that. I just know that it's there, and every time it comes up, it's like, what the frig, man?
Because I would know as a kid, if I couldn't afford to go and buy, all the new comics on the shelf, big thing when I was younger was the Saturday morning cartoons. And you didn't know what the lineup was going to be, because it wasn't like there was Entertainment Weekly or anything like that. And my parents would never buy TV Guide, because they're like, oh, it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
Whatever's on TV is on TV. But every August, they would put an ad in all the comic books where it would be all the Saturday morning cartoon lineup.
Oh.
So you would get your ABC, you would get your CBS, you would get your NBC. And so what I would do is I would go in, and they usually put them in the dead center of the book. Mm-hmm. So I would go into the comic book shop, or go into the magazine section of the supermarket or whatever, and I would open them up so I could see what kind of cartoons were coming up. And then the best part about it was usually like the Friday night before Labor Day weekend, there would be like a primetime special where they would like tell you and give you like little sneak previews of what was going to be on Saturday morning.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but that's
totally changed. They don't have that now.
Right. There's no Saturday morning cartoons.
The ads now, I was just reading one of the House of Powers of X, or is it House of X and Powers of X? Anyways, I'm reading that whole new X-Men event that's going on right now, which is fairly simple, and it's the reboot of the X-Men. They've made it very clear, so that's all awesome. Like that's my problem with the events, is if I try and jump in on it, or if it's like I feel like I have to read it just because of some other things going on, I need to know what else is related to it. You guys need to make it really simple. Thankfully, and I don't know if that's been made simple to everybody. I mean, it was out there on comicbook.com. I'm sure we had it on Geeks Worldwide, but like everybody knew, okay, this is the X-Men reboot. Like this is in Marvel. This is important. It's plain and simple. There's nothing else that's going to be going on right now. I don't feel like that's always the case. Like one of the storylines I have here is that I really like is Dark Knight's Metal. Awesome. I definitely recommend it for anybody who likes Batman. The Batman Who Laughs is an amazing villain. But it's just like I didn't know if that was a reboot of DC, what was going on. I had some people tell me it wasn't. Some people told me it was. I mean, it wasn't. But it definitely helped integrate in those new characters from the New Age of Heroes, whatever I was mentioned with the Silencer was a part of. But even then, outside of that, it's like no one else seems really affected by any of this. Yet those characters are in here, and they interact with Deathstroke. They interact, like just talking about the Silencer. She interacts with Nightwing. It's like, what the frig's going on? And it just gets so confusing with these events. Like
and that's why I don't read them anymore.
I mean, but your head's spinning just listening to that, right?
I'm like, none of this sounds like anything I can jump in at the ground floor on.
No, it's awful. I don't like that. That's something I cannot stand, is the amount of events they have them with. I mean, like they did it with Marvel. They have the Realms thing. I don't know if it's still actively going on, but it was going on for a while. The Deadpool was mixed in it. And like I'm getting Deadpool 13, and it's like, Why is he involved in this? I don't need him there. Get him out, bring him back, and just let me have his story. I don't need any of that. But I will say, at the same time, when it comes to Batman White Knight, a standalone series, they ended up having a second one, but still, it's like it's off on its own. I know it's just, this is it. No, not related to anything else. I love that. I'm a big fan of those things. Give me those all day long.
So go back to what they used to call them then. Limited series.
Okay.
Go back to that. Go back to having,
They call them limited series still sometimes.
But did they tell you right from the beginning how many issues it's going to be?
Some of them, they do that. Like with, was it Batman, what was it? The one I was just talking about, the Batman Who Laughs. That was a limited series. Like they said it from the beginning. It was the issue. It ended up being 7 issues. It was supposed to be 6 and it became 7, but like, that's what it was.
It's so much easier to make it so people can digest it that way, because then they look at it and they say, okay, I can collect these 6 or 7 and not have to worry about where it goes in the other books. And then you just hope that they start to buy the other ones based on the fact that I really enjoyed reading that, but now that series is over.
I think that, I agree. I think that is the most effective way to get characters in. And I think with some characters, you should just have it be that way. Like Constantine, I think he's perfect that way. Just have him be limited series all the time. Like, because one of my favorite books that I've ever read, possibly my favorite series ever, is Constantine City of Demons, which I believe is different from, I know it's different from the CW show like we saw, it was a 3-minute episode, something crazy like that.
I don't know.
Oh, I thought you were the one that told me about that. But anyways, like they had that little thing, and then I think they ended up making like a made straight for DVD movie, something like that. It's different than the book, and that the book is written. It's not written by Sean Murphy, I don't think, but it's drawn by Sean Murphy, and it is gritty Constantine at his best. And I don't know if it's Hellblazer or Constantine, but either way, same guy. The title switch, I mean, that's another thing that gets annoying. Like at one point it was Constantine, at one point it was Hellblazer. It's mainly Hellblazer. But anyway, I think that's one that I definitely recommend to anybody to read if you like dark stuff.
If I remember right, wasn't it always Hellblazer? But then when they made the movie with Keanu Reeves, they couldn't use Hellblazer.
That may be true.
So they switched it to Constantine, and that's where the confusion started.
I think, yes, that is. It was always Hellblazer. It started as Hellblazer. Like I have the first collection of however many
I remember reading Hellblazer,
but I don't, and I know the stuff that was what was it? The Rebirth was Hellblazer, I believe, but then the New 52 is Constantine. That's why I can't remember if the City of Demons. I'm pretty sure it was Constantine : City of Demons. I'm not certain, but either way, it gets confusing. But I mean,
right.
I don't care either way. Either way, it's awesome. I highly recommend that one. And I think that was late aughts. Might have been like 2012 actually. I don't know. But
so taking it to the topic for tonight, it sounds like maybe I misunderstood what the format was going to be for tonight.
I mean, I just let it ride. You set the tone actually early on. I just let it ride.
Well, what did you pick here when you picked your 10?
I ended up not being able to get 10 because I had to cram it in.
What were you picking? What was your formula? Was it?
I picked my favorite ones.
Like storylines or titles?
I have titles and I have storylines.
Okay, well, if it's a mixture of that, because I have titles.
Okay.
So if it's a mixture of that, I think it'll work out. Now, the important thing to note here is we're not picking what we think is the best.
No.
We're picking what we enjoyed.
Yes.
So I think, like, okay, if you're going to look at something that is the best,
yeah,
I mean, what would have to be on that Mount Rushmore?
Detective Comics is obviously on Mount Rushmore.
I don't even mean, I'm talking even just storylines, you got to have...
Oh, storylines?
Days of Future Past would be one of them.
Yep.
Probably... I think The Death and Life of Superman would have to be up there.
Yep. Would Infinity...
Yep.
Gauntlet be there? Yep.
Yep. So all that stuff, Secret Wars, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Secret Wars, yeah.
Those are kind of what started off all these events. So...
Why do I feel like people have mixed feelings about Crisis of Infinite Earths?
If you're a DC fan, you'll love it. If you're not, it's boring.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of, like where people would go with the best. I'm not all about that. I'm going to be about some titles that are going to be like, what the F are you talking about?
Oh, good. I like to hear that. Okay. So, personally... If I was to, like, what got me really back into comics was Red Hood, reading him. And that's why I love him so much. And that's why I'm ride or die with him no matter what. And I think that he's a character that most people can get in on. Under the Red Hood is where he starts. And that's where he's at his... I mean, that is the truest Jason Todd he is. I'm sorry. Truest Red Hood that he is, where he's actually kind of like a villain. He's still an anti-hero by definition with what he does, but he is the closest to being a villain that he's ever been. He kills people, and there are times where he doesn't necessarily do that. The artwork is not my favorite Red Hood drawings, but the story is probably up there for the best. In general, the Red Hood title is awesome. Scott Lobdell has handled it primarily. And I would recommend people reading the New 52 because that's where he's out there killing people. And he didn't give a damn. Whereas now it's like, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. More often than not, he actually really almost never does now. Back then, though, he didn't mess around. So that would be, those two would be where I start. So that's kind of my 1-2.
All right. So we're going from the favorite down, or
just do what you want. It doesn't matter. I mean, okay. I didn't want to get too much into lists. Like I just wanted to be. Like,
I went in kind of an order of it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Except for the last one that I'll mention because of the importance that it has. But we'll get into that. So this is a comic that I enjoyed that made me realize that there was comics beyond. Well, my top one kind of did too. But this made me realize that there were comics kind of beyond the stuff that you're going to find on that spinny shelf.
Okay.
There's more than just Marvel. There's more than just DC.
Oh, okay.
And this was a comic called Boris the Bear. Okay. Have you ever heard of Boris the Bear?
I've never heard of Boris the Bear.
Actually, a Dark Horse comic from the very early days. He might have been the first Dark Horse character. But from the early days of Dark Horse, 1985, I want to say it might have been. And this is when the anthropomorphic animal craze happened. So the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hit, becomes a success. Now all of a sudden, there's all kinds of animals. There's knockoff titles of the Ninja Turtles. Like that's the thing. Like everybody was,
Okay. Oh, that's where the Boris the Bear came from.
Everybody was reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so all these other comic companies started to try to have their own version of these. And so Eclipse Comics, I think it was, had preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroos. Then there was, I forget who the other comic company was, but they had adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters.
Oh my God.
So they were like those guys were great because their names, there was 4 of them, I think. And it was like Chuck for Chuck Norris, Jackie for Jackie Chan, Clint for Clint Eastwood. Who was the 4th one? Bruce for Bruce Lee. So there's like these ridiculous, animal ninja characters all over the comics world. And so when I'm going into the long box at the flea market and spending my 50 cents a book, these are the kind of books that I'm finding. And some of them were actually funny. The adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters was one of my favorite. They put out a 3D one. They put out a knockoff from it called Hamster Vice.
Okay.
Where it was like a Miami Vice type comic, but with the hamsters. It was a lot of fun, stupid stuff. But as all this stuff is rising up, in comes Boris the Bear, literally created just to try and go out and kill all these other characters.
Oh, really?
They would do parody versions of these characters, and so they had like fake Ninja Turtles in the Boris the Bear universe, and he would just go kill them.
Really?
He was a little bear about this big, camo gear, red bandana like Rambo, M16, and he would just go kill all these other characters. So it was fun because it made fun of the stuff that we were reading otherwise.
Oh, I like that. I love when comics can laugh at themselves, and that's why Marvel's been so successful, is when they can laugh at themselves and realize, like, yeah, we're just comics.
And it broke down some of that fourth wall a little bit too, and plus he was a badass for a little bear.
And that's all. Oh, he's little. Oh, he's like a little teddy bear?
Yeah, he was like a teddy bear sized bear. But it was
awesome.
It was maybe not like Ted size, but like a little bit bigger.
Gotcha.
And it was very, very funny, very kind of a lot of in-joke stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that was a great one when I was a kid. I think he stuck around for quite a while too, Boris the Bear.
So I like that pick. I've never heard of Boris the Bear. And it's Dark Horse, you said?
Dark Horse. Maybe I haven't looked on the Comixology app. They might have it.
I'll have to look and see if Dark Horse still sells that, because Dark Horse has they have some good stuff. Like I said, No One Left to Fight. Obviously, Hellboy's been around forever. Now, Hellboy's one that I like a lot. Not one that I would say is in my top 10, and not one I'd necessarily recommend to everybody. I really got to know you to recommend Hellboy, because I only know the character so well, but the art is very different. that's one of the things.
One of the ones that's definitely not for everybody.
Yeah, the stories. I mean, that's why the movie was like, yeah, it's not terrible. Like, it's not my favorite necessarily, and I still don't give. I would never give it like this crazy good grade, even like as a non-objective score. But when it comes to, the movie versus the books, yeah, it wasn't. Like, it was done. It did the books pretty much justice, I would say, and I think Mike Mignola
I know what you mean.
felt that one. Yeah,
yeah.
And it was. I mean, it was
the Ron Perlman one was made to try to be more digestible to a general audience,
and it definitely was, and I liked it a lot. I mean, Wes dumps on it, but I don't think Wes has seen a minute of either of them, other than like the trailers or something like that. So, but anyway, so if another one I'm gonna pick, and I don't have as many Marvel ones now as that I'd recommend to most people, but for an ongoing title, actually, this is not ongoing anymore. This is actually nice. I think it went 11 series. I think there are 2 trades out there. The X-Men Red. This was last year and the year before, I want to say. And I think it was Tom Taylor who wrote it. And he was a guy who created Honey Badger, which is a very fun character. It's X-Men, the X-Men doing what the X-Men do best, where they fight a major social issue, but they're not fighting one that we necessarily deal with. Yes, there's prejudice against them, and people hate mutants and blah blah blah, and then they're getting framed and all this stuff. But it's you're dealing with a social issue, but at the same time, it's like we're not. Like it's still fantasy, it's still fictional, and I always appreciate that. Like I don't mind the social issues, but like Green Arrow would get to be a little bit too much for me, like especially the Rebirth run. Like I liked it, I didn't love it. It just seemed too heavy-handed to me at times. And then in the X-Men Red, you have Jean Grey, you have Storm, Honey Badger, X-23, which they're a great pair. I like their series that they had together. I wish that didn't come to an end. But the other thing was we go back to how things were so quick. That was the one book I told you that was like, I could read that thing in less than 10 minutes. It was nuts how fast that was, how little writing there was. The action was great, the artwork was awesome, but it was fast, which sometimes I didn't mind. At the same time, though, it was like, this is way too quick. But they also had Gambit in there, and I feel like they introduced one other character in the course of things, but it was a good mix. I think, was Nightcrawler in there? Nightcrawler was in there too. One of my absolute favorite covers ever. X-Men Red #2, the Nightcrawler on that cover. Whoo! That thing was badass. He looked awesome. I think he had a beard in there too. It was real good. But I would say that's where I would go next.
Well, I'll play off of that then, and I will say one of my all-time favorites is Uncanny X-Men, but the Chris Claremont run.
Okay.
So was that 75 to? Let me see if I can find the exact numbers here. 75 to 91.
Okay.
Because I think in 91, that's when he was working with Jim Lee, and I think they kind of let Jim Lee take the reins on the X universe from that point on. But Claremont is, to me, the definitive era for the X-Men. So 75, you're talking about, you're getting Wolverine involved in all of this. You're getting the storylines that we remember, where, no more everybody's in a yellow suit. And you're getting, I think it was, John Byrne was the main artist that he worked with for a lot of that run.
Really?
And that kind of gave, to me, the definitive look of a lot of these X-Men characters. Mm-hmm. So when you see, like, just pull up a 1983 X-Men comic. Like, to me, that's what the X-Men look like and should always look like. Everybody had their own distinct style, but they were all part of the team. So they didn't have to all wear leather suits like in the movie. They didn't have to all wear yellow suits like in the early days of the comic.
I got lost here. It's not Jim Lee's X-Men are not your X-Men?
Well, he came toward the end of
Gotcha. Okay.
But the early 80s, early to mid 80s X-Men to me is the best look. And what I liked about that is that was the time when they were really starting to take on some real storylines. And kind of just using, we've talked about this before, where they're using the mutant storyline as something,
racism,
basically not just racism either, but it could be anything. It could be any kind of it. It could be something against, people that are mentally handicapped or
homophobic.
Like, and a lot of these things kind of played through. And even as a kid reading it, you start to realize that, like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I'm weird too.
Yeah.
So I could be an X-Men, and that's why.
Oh yeah, we could all be X-Men. Yeah.
That's where you went from thinking like mutants are weird to being like, oh, they're actually more like us than some of these other characters are.
Yep.
In these books, so to me that was like the prime X-Men era.
Yeah,
And
I think if you were gonna read, if you want your kids to actually learn something and you want them to like, and they like comics, you got to get them on the X-Men, and that's why I say read, because it's a self-contained 11-issue series that's all there, and you're getting what you're talking about right now.
But what was good about the era that I'm talking about is it was before the X-Men were the X-Men.
Oh.
So like they were kind of the bastard child of Marvel for a long time.
Early on I can see why those outfits from the early stages are.
No, but even those 70s and 80s X-Men, like there was a particular group of comic fans that were reading those. It wasn't the general audience. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until the cartoon series and then the Jim Lee era with, then bringing in Excalibur and X-Force and all that stuff and Cable and all that. Like that's when they started to really make the leap of being one of the prime Marvel properties.
Uh-huh.
But until that point, they were kind of like, kind of like what Iron Man was before the movies.
Uh-huh.
Where it's like, yeah, it's recognizable, but you don't really, there's certain people that are fans, but you can't just go and start talking X-Men with anybody on the street.
Right. Now, going off all the X-Men stuff and how they branched out, I can't believe I didn't even think of this initially. Like I said, I came from work and Westwood loved it. It's just perfect where I just am off the cuff on all this crap. But one of my favorite ones, absolute favorite, and I recommend this to anybody who hasn't read it. If you like Deadpool, you absolutely have to read Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. Oh my God. Deadpool kills everyone, whatever. I forget which one it is, but that was phenomenal. He goes after everyone. There's a second one. It's all right. I don't love it. But the first one, I could not recommend it more. And then there's like a Punisher one where he kills like all the Marvel Universe. But they're like all zombies. It's not the same. Deadpool, just the jokes are there. He doesn't. It's kind of his. I don't want to spoil too much of it because I don't know how many people have read it. But the artwork is good, and when you think like, how's he going to kill this character? You can't really kill that character. Trust me. Anybody who's important, you see him kill them. He finds a way because he's friggin' Deadpool, and he does not stop. I absolutely love it. But and that's one where and again, it's just a little spinoff,
right?
Universe again, which fine, but not nearly as good as the first one.
Well,
but have you read that one?
As with most sequels, no, I haven't.
Oh, I have it. I may need to bring it in for you next time. I know you're a busy man, but like
this is probably get it on the Marvel app, right?
You have that?
Yeah, I still have it.
Oh, you still have it? Oh, you probably can. Honestly, Tim, it's just so good. You'll breeze through that thing like it's nothing.
I canceled them, and then the card that I was using, like I transferred some money onto it, and then all of a sudden it just charged me for all those apps again. So I'm like, yeah, well, whatever.
There you go.
I'll ride it out. But
it's definitely, dude, that one's really, really good. Seriously, any Deadpool fan out there, you're looking to read something, or it's like you've always think, maybe not. Trust me, just do it. Don't think about it.
Well, then I will play off of that, and I will go with talking about things that don't really affect the continuity of the characters. I will go with the series that made that whole idea possible, where we said we can throw continuity out the window and we can kind of just speculate on things, and that would be the What If series.
Oh.
Loved that as a kid. Loved the fact that,
I feel like it's affected everything now. That's like all these spinoffs, all these one-offs, like that's more the one-offs. That's what we can think the what ifs.
I think it goes right back to that, where you said, you know what? Like, we did this, we did that. Let's see what would happen if we took it in a different direction. And the first what if that I ever read was, what if the Green Goblin hadn't killed Gwen Stacy?
Ooh.
And as a huge Mary Jane fan, I was like, this is a universe I have to find out about.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what got me going on that line of comics. And I would pick up every what if that I could. You've got the Watcher kind of overseeing and saying, we know that this happened and we know that this happened, but what if this had happened?
Ooh.
And so it really, and I'm trying to think of some of the other what if titles that I liked as a kid. I could probably pull up a list of some of them, but there was all kinds of different ones. And it was always fun to speculate and to at least for one issue,
Yeah.
Kind of take yourself out of the regular continuity of the comics. That's why I like the fact that they're doing the series for Disney Plus or Disney. What is that? Disney Plus.
Disney Plus. Yeah.
I love the fact they're doing the series for that. I love the fact that they're having Jeffrey Wright play the Watcher, but I especially love the fact that it's animated.
Yeah.
Because now they're not going to be limited by anything.
Right.
So they can really go crazy with this, and bringing in the actual actors who have played these characters to play those characters. But right away, what if Iron Man didn't die?
Yeah.
There's so many places you can go with it now, and it'll be a lot of fun for people. And hopefully, if you've ever had the chance to pick up some of those old original 80s what ifs, I recommend it because it will totally blow your mind when it comes to some of these comic book storylines.
You know what? Somehow in the course of all that, you reminded me of another one I don't have on my list initially. Just again because of the nature of how I formulated it all. Did you ever read Flashpoint?
No.
Oh man, Flashpoint is so. I'm not a Flash guy at all, but Flashpoint is so freaking good. Batman, Thomas Wayne as Batman is pop. I may like him more than Bruce Wayne as Batman. Seriously, it is friggin' awesome. And there's spin-offs from it too. Oh man, I can't recommend that enough.
You want some what ifs from my era?
Real quick before you do that, anybody who's interested, who wants something different, that if you haven't read Flashpoint and you read comics, then I don't know what the hell's the matter with you. That's why it shouldn't be on my list because it's mandatory reading. Go ahead.
We're talking about the what if affecting later storylines.
Oh.
What if the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner?
Oh yeah.
Which we saw happen.
Yep.
What if Captain America had not vanished during World War II? What if someone else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by a radioactive spider? And now we have a whole Spider-Verse.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. What if Jane Foster had found the hammer of Thor?
Yeah, well, we've seen that now.
Yep.
We see it again in the movies too.
Some of these are really ridiculous.
I told you that they had a new.
What if Invisible Girl had married the Submariner?
Oh, really?
Yeah. What if Captain America had been elected president?
Oh, yeah. That would have been. That's a good callback to a previous episode of ours. But was it? They had that recent run of what ifs, and the only one I picked up that I was like, I have to read this was what if Peter Parker became the Punisher, and it was like Spider-Man still as the Punisher. And I was like, oh, man, make this into a real thing. Don't make it a one-off. This is badass. Make it a whole what if series and just roll with it. Give me a mini-series. It would have been great. But it ended just in a blink. All right, so my next one that I'm going to bring up, I have a couple that I've already mentioned. And this one I definitely already mentioned was Constantine's City of Demons. You don't have to have read any other Constantine to read this. It is perfect, like John effing Constantine, the entire series. We're dealing with some. These are characters who don't necessarily know him all that well, but like there are some he deals with and is like, what? And there are twists and turns all along the way. And that's one thing I like about Constantine is as much as I'm really good about suspending my belief and not assuming something's going to happen. It is definitely a skill that I have, and I think that's why there are certain movies that Wes doesn't like that I do like. And I'm like, because I'll sit back and think, I don't know what's going to happen. Just going to let it ride and see what they feed me. And then whatever it is, if it's awesome, then it's awesome. And I'm still predicting things along the way, but I don't assume necessarily that's going to happen. Do you get what I mean? Mm-hmm. And with Constantine, you believe that he's going to end up being all right all the time, but he flirts with danger so much that it's hard to tell. And in this issue, he's like right up in it constantly, and there are just some crazy ass twists in the course of it all that you're just like your jaw drops. And it's in Sean Murphy's artwork, the things that happen because he's gritty with his artwork, and then the story is immensely gritty, immensely violent, vulgar, everything. It is perfect. So if you want something dark as hell, Constantine's City of Demons above anything else. It is. I haven't read it a second time yet. I haven't read anything a second time yet. That will be the first thing I probably read twice. It's well worth anybody's time that likes dark stuff and horror.
Playing off of that, it's very cool how it works out this way.
Yes, it's not a shock at all, Tim.
But playing off of that and staying in the world of hell and Hellblazer and demons and all that, Spawn has to be on my list
badass.
because not only I was already a McFarlane fan by the time Spawn came out.
Yep.
I was already a McFarlane fan before Image Comics. To have him be unleashed. Why are you shaking your head?
How is he? Did he come out? How did he come out before
Spider-Man.
Oh, I'm sorry, McFarlane. Sorry. I think you were a Spawn fan before Image Comics.
No. I'm sorry, McFarlane fan.
Yeah,
I might have misspoke.
No, that's okay.
But I was, already a big fan of his style. This was him unleashed, being able to run the storylines and
Do whatever the hell you want, man.
and really it was like nothing else. They say that when Nirvana came out and started the whole like grunge explosion, everything was, hair metal. It was Poison and Skid Row and, bands like that and all these hair metal bands. And all of a sudden here comes the reality, the gut punch of grunge with Nirvana. And it really was like a ground zero type moment for that. Same thing with Spawn, where all of a sudden we didn't realize that this is the way that it could be.
Yeah.
Where it's a comic book, but it's about something so much darker than that. Mm-hmm. And it's really like a morality play playing out before us. And it came at just the right time where I was a teenager and I could really kind of understand some of those concepts. The art being so different, didn't have to follow any rules. Look at Sam and Twitch.
Oh, yeah.
They're just odd-looking people.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
They don't have to follow any particular... One person doesn't have to look like another person.
Normally, I don't like that, but I love it with McFarlane.
And everything about it just worked. And to have the story that it had and for it to have gripped people the way that it did, it was awesome. And it was exactly what we needed at that time. And
I will say to the average reader who's a new reader, hasn't, or just you haven't read Spawn... I know, because I know I was reading other stuff before I went back and read Spawn. I just never like, I don't know, we'll see. But I went back and I've been playing catch up as much as I went and got 300, and I'm gonna get 301 because I want to make sure I have those because they're, obviously so important. You go back and read the old stuff. You're like Tim's talking about how badass he is and all these things and edgy, and it doesn't feel like that now. It doesn't feel like that because it's just like now you have that.
Yeah.
I mean, you go and read Moon Knight, and like some of the stuff that I've seen through the years with him, it's like, oh damn, it's edgy. I mean, even Batman, Red Hood, all these characters, there's so much edge. But it started with McFarlane, and that's what you got to consider. This is where everybody built off of, was his stuff with Spawn.
The only characters that came close to Spawn prior to Spawn would have been the Punisher.
Yep,
and
makes sense.
And Frank Miller's Batman.
Okay.
Those two were probably the closest we came, but they didn't really go over the edge. Spawn went over the edge.
Spawn was, the first Billy Kincaid.
I know you recently went back and checked this out. If you are like, listen, I don't really care about comic books anymore.
Yes.
You could actually totally avoid the Spawn comic books and just watch the animated HBO series.
It's available if you have HBO subscription.
And it's incredible.
Oh,
it's the best animated cartoons of all time.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the production and everything, it's like it gives you that nostalgia feel a little bit. Like you can tell it's not from this day and age, but when you go back and think of the X-Men, you think of the Spider-Man show and Batman, it's like Spawn was pretty advanced compared to those other ones. I felt like he was better, like in terms of the production.
And it was on at 11:30 on Friday nights.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this wasn't a show.
That's a terrible time.
No, it's like it was at a firm time of letting you know, like, this is an adult show. This is not something for kids.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so it was on at a time when,
Friday night is
But back in those days, that's when HBO ran that kind of stuff.
Oh.
Before The Sopranos, there wasn't a Sunday night HBO.
Gotcha.
That was something that came later. At that
I would think Friday night in general is a terrible night for a show because everybody goes out Fridays.
No, Friday night was the time for HBO. All their shows like Dream On were on back then, and some of the other series they would have that came out around that. Larry Sanders Show would debut on Friday night. That was the time.
Oh.
So this was like, it was one of their flagship shows when it came out.
Okay. I mean, it's an awesome one. I mean,
it's 20 years old, and it's still better than anything else you'll see today.
I went through that like it was nothing. I mean, yeah, it's really good. Do you think we can get Wes to watch it? I don't. I highly doubt it. It's animated, so he's not in on it. All right. The other another one I brought up earlier was Batman White Knight. This is Sean Murphy again. So I have certain writers who obviously you have certain writers who you like. I like Christopher Priest. He's going to come up in the course of things. I like Scott Snyder. I've brought him up already too in the course of it, and he'll be brought up on my list. And I think a lot of people like Scott Snyder. Sean Murphy, I like Scott Lobdell a lot, but he makes sometimes he pisses me off a little bit. I like him a lot, but sometimes he pisses me off. But Sean Murphy is probably my favorite writer because I look at Constantine's City of Demons. Actually, I'm sorry, he drew that. But what he does with Batman White Knight, and now he's doing again with Batman Curse of the White Knight, which the next issue, I'll be reviewing that this week. That's issue number 3, I believe, is coming out this week. He puts Batman in a position that I've never seen him in before. And I think when, like, now, because he's been around for so long and because he's just been so great forever, I love seeing Batman uncomfortable. But there are times I feel like writers try and go too far with things. And I get it. You have to do that to some extent. I think Scott Snyder's doing that with Batman Last Night. I think that's him and Capullo that are in on that. And Capullo is another good penciler artist. But when it comes to Batman White Knight, it's one of those, again, that's like it's self-contained in the sense that it's its own story, but at the same time it's all in Gotham. It's not this big, crazy, cataclysmic, world-ending thing. And still, Batman is put in an immensely uncomfortable position, and I've just never seen him second-guess himself like I do in Batman White Knight. And I think that, and personally, I felt like that was the best book of 2018. I know it was partially in 2017. I think it started in 2017, but it was the best book of like that those 2 years. I have to look back at 17, but definitely of 18. I absolutely loved that thing. So that's another one I cannot recommend highly. Like, look, don't get me wrong, Red Hood. If I'm talking about ongoing series, Red Hood's one that I mentioned. I got another one that I'm going to mention in here too. I read Deadpool, and there are a few others that I read that are ongoing series. But man, when it comes to these one-offs, I mean, I personally think, Tim, that like we talked about it before a little bit. This is where you get in on books, is where you read these one-offs. It's like, oh, I like this character. He seems interesting. You know, I got lucky with Red Hood. I struck gold. I started with, I think, the New 52, and I just loved it. But I kept hearing about him so much, like, oh my God, I can't stop reading about this guy. But he was a new character. He was new, but he wasn't new. Like, he mattered because he was an ex-Robin, but at the same time, he hated Batman. So it was like, it worked. Like, I was in on that, but I don't think it's always so easy for people to get in on characters. So that's why I think these are so important.
Playing off of that?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to go with the 1987 Batman Year One.
Oh, okay,
which was the second Frank Miller take on Batman. The first one being The Dark Knight Returns, which was very much the prototype for the Batman that we got in the Tim Burton movies and the Batman that we have through the Nolan movies. Mm-hmm. The idea of him being this brooding, the Dark Knight, this guy who's kind of messed up by the death of his parents, and it's not just the hero's call that he feels. Right. It's this inner turmoil that he's trying to work out through the Batman persona.
I think it's what everybody loves him as the most.
And so Year One was basically, from what I understand, when Frank Miller when Frank Miller got to do The Dark Knight the way that he wanted to do The Dark Knight, and I can't reiterate this enough, he created that Batman. Before, the Batman that we had from the 1940s to the 1970s was essentially a detective in a bat suit.
Yeah, Adam West.
And he, maybe not that campy all the time, but it was really just, it was about solving crimes more than it was, being this badass.
Right.
And so part of the deal with getting to remake the image of Batman is he had to remake the Batman origin story, which is what Batman Year One did. And it incorporated a lot of the elements that kind of set the tone for the later stories. So we got to, anybody that's read Batman, and I know that you've gone back and read some of the older Batman, Batman's origin story has changed 50 different times. But we can look at this Year One as being like, this is kind of where we started going in the same direction all the time. And it took that same gritty approach. So it really we wouldn't have had the Nolan Batmans if it wasn't for Year One.
Batman Year One and Frank Miller. For sure.
So I mean, and for that reason alone, like just not so much. The Dark Knight Returns reinvented Batman, but it was year one that solidified it as being a viable storyline going forward.
So if I was to say like who my favorite writers are, I mean Sean Murphy's an artist who became a writer, or an artist who writes, I guess you could say. But I would probably go with my top three. I would say are Murphy, Priest, and Lobdell. I'm not sure which order necessarily. Who would you say is your favorite? Do you know, like off the top of your head, your favorite or your top three at least?
I think probably Frank Miller's my favorite writer.
Is he?
Just because of the fact that he had no fear in taking what other people had done and what kind of the personas had been for these characters and completely reinventing them. You know, He did it with Daredevil too. Like Daredevil, if you read 70s Daredevil, he's whatever. You know, it's like this guy running around in a red suit. It was Frank Miller who turned Hell's Kitchen into a character in that book.
You know what's funny is I got the Frank Miller, like the first edition graphic novel of it, or the first series, whatever it is, and by Frank Miller, and I read it and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So my parents were like, oh, you know, what do you read? And I was like, oh, if you were going to get me anything, it'd be the second edition of that. And they got me number 2. They got me like Origin Daredevil, I think it was something like that. It was like the old stuff.
Didn't he have like a yellow suit back then?
Maybe it wasn't that one. Maybe it was like right after. Like it was the reboot from there. If there was another one, because he wasn't wearing a yellow suit, but like Elektra was in it. Her hair is just like. But like the art was like, this is like exactly what you were talking about. I was like, guys, like this is what I was talking about. I appreciate it. You know, I mean, but it's like, no, this ain't it.
He put the grit into comics and he put the realism into comics. So to me, that's always going to be the standout paradigm shift.
You always got to respect that. I mean, as much as I say, like I'm giving all new stuff to read, I always respect those people who are like that.
You wouldn't have Red Hood if it wasn't for Frank Miller.
No, for sure. And I look at McFarlane in a very similar light too.
Right.
I mean, like that. When I look at just as a businessman, I mean that's a guy who I respect a ton.
McFarlane did it. Miller did it as the writer. McFarlane did it starting as the artist, but then also as a writer as well.
Yeah. And I appreciate that immensely, both of them. But anyways, so actually, I'm kind of gonna go off again what you were saying before with some of the Batman stuff, but going back to what I talked about with him with getting heroes to be uncomfortable. Batman Hush is another one where he is constantly second guessing himself, and I went in knowing what happened in the course of it all, and this is Jeff Loeb Loeb, I don't know how you say his name, Loeb. And Jim Lee. First of all, Jim Lee. Damn, he is such a good artist. I mean, everybody knows him from his X-Men stuff, but him drawing, it was Batman, Catwoman, Poison Ivy, Killer Croc's in this. You see, there are a couple of people, I don't want to spoil things. Huntress is in it. Huntress looks, I'm not one for much for saying like characters look sexy as hell, but damn, she looks sexy as hell in this.
Jim Lee likes to do that with the female characters.
I mean, he does a good job with it too. But I mean, like, and there are guys who look sexy in the books too. But I'm not one to throw that out there. But Jim Lee's Huntress, man, you were born to draw Huntress. But anyways, Hush is one of my absolute favorite villains. Like, I will go and say all these things about the Batman Who Laughs and how awesome he is and how much I think that he's Batman's best villain. Like, he fights him better than anybody. Hush to me is just like the motivation behind that character, and I don't know where the hell they pulled that from, but he is such it's just such an interesting take. I do not want to ruin it for anybody. But that's another one that I highly recommend it. That one I breezed through so quickly. Like, I have a tough time starting some of these, not breeze through quickly, but like I couldn't stop reading it. There are some times where I get books and it's like I know I'm gonna like this a lot, so I really got to make sure like I read this, I get this out of the way, get this work done before everything has to be perfect before I can read it. All my work has to be done because otherwise I know it's like a TV show. I'll get stuck in on it and it's like you're gonna see me for an hour. I'm gone. See ya. Sorry. And Hush was absolutely like that. Oh God, so freaking good. That's what I'd love Wes to read.
So I can't really play off of that this time.
Damn it!
Kind of, maybe a little bit.
Well, I had a streak go. We had a streak going.
Maybe a little bit. It's like volleyball, and like I was the one that just let it fall in front of me.
Yeah.
But I originally, when I put this list together, I kind of wanted to say like no miniseries because
I can understand.
I like I said, I didn't realize that we were going to focus on particular storylines, or else I would have said, well, then a miniseries can certainly count.
You're doing yeah.
But Venom Lethal Protector.
Okay.
1993.
Here we go.
That to me was another big watershed moment where, wait, I'm supposed to root for the bad guy?
Oh.
And
man,
they find a way to make him stay the bad guy, but also be the hero.
Yeah, that's it right there.
And towing that line and also introducing the other symbiotes and all that. And for anybody that's not familiar with the Lethal Protector storyline, it's the movie that they made about Venom that follows the Lethal Protector series. Mm-hmm. Not exactly,
okay,
but that's kind of where it came about, and that was a game changer because now, in the 90s we're going through this whole thing where anti-heroes are cool anyway.
Yeah,
but at the same time, like now, Venom became a much more marketable character.
Oh, right.
Now you could walk into the store and find Venom action figures. And you could play as Venom in video games, and so it became something where it started that shift toward him, not only as a character towing that line, but also making it so that it was acceptable to want to root for the villain.
Oh, that's where it all started.
Yep, and not long after that, I started getting back into some of the toys, and for the longest time, I had a foot-high Venom action figure.
Really?
Yeah, and I had like a whole shelf of
Venom. Yeah, that's right. Venom's one of your favorite guys. That's right.
At one point,
he was your favorite.
At one point, I guess I should admit this now. At one point, I had an entire room of my house filled with toys.
Oh gosh.
When
like your house, like you have now, or you mean
not
like
the one I have now, the one that I lived in when I first moved out on my own. When I moved out of my parents' house, I had a 2-bedroom house, and before my son was born.
Okay.
The second bedroom was my toy room.
Oh, okay. And
so I had, shelves all around the room.
I don't have a problem with that.
And all of my action figures and everything. So.
I have so much stuff in my place. I finally got the newest Red Hood that came out. I mean, those things were go flying off the shelves. If I didn't go and tell my guy to keep one for me, I would have probably not got one. And when I got it, I was like, oh my God, I have 4 Red Hood figures. I have the Pop. I have the Arkham Knight series that my brother got me. I got the Injustice one that my guy texted me about, and I was like, oh, it's 3-inch, so it's kind of different. All right, I'll take it. And then I have this one that I've been waiting for like all friggin' year. I have 4 Red Hoods. So believe me, I've somehow accrued like 5 Pops. I don't know where the hell that all came from. So I don't have enough space for all the stuff that I have at this stage. It's ridiculous. But it's just easy. I mean now too, especially. And that's another thing where McFarlane changed the game. I have a Spawn action figure, and it's an older one, but it's like this is just as impressive as some of the stuff I'm seeing now.
I didn't keep a lot of my toys. Mm-hmm. I kept my deluxe Spawn.
Really?
The one with the wings. The cape comes out like the wings.
Oh.
And it actually retracts. And then you can have it pop back out again.
Really?
I kept that.
Oh, that's pretty sick.
I have that. I have. I had the.
The one I have him now is the only one I have is like he's got like devil wings or demon wings. Excuse me. I'll send you a picture sometime.
I have. I think I still have the manga spawns. They came out with a manga line.
Really?
Yeah. So I think I still have that, and I have. I don't think I have all the movie figures, but I still have the movie Malbolgia.
Really?
That MFer is like this big. It's awesome.
That's like, is that 16 inches?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, see, I can't.
And I have the clown.
So my brother he actually just recently, he just moved in Connecticut. Like he was already living there, but he's like moved in with his girl. and he had to get rid of some of the stuff because he moved in with her in smaller space, things like that. And he had a bunch of our old figures. He had like a Sabretooth. He's like, I can't keep it anymore. It's like, well, it's mine now. Captain America, which was mine that I had given him. But one thing he did was, and I forget what line it is now, but it's like still kind of ongoing, but I don't know. I think it's still ongoing, or maybe it was more like in the 2015 era, maybe before that. But it was, I think it was Marvel Heroes was the line. But they're like, I think they're 3-inch figures. And what my brother did was he got them, he wants them all the same size. And he has like Falcon, Zemo, Bucky Barnes, not Winter Soldier. And then I think the one other one that he has is, I think he has, it's either Hank Pym's Yellow Jacket or it's Giant Man. I think it's Giant Man, and it's like the Marvel Legends version, which is like 7 inches. So against all the other characters, he looks like normal size, like the other Marvel Legends, but you put him with the characters he has now, the Marvel Heroes ones that he likes that are 3 inches, he actually looks like Giant Man because he's 4 inches taller.
There's some pretty good toys that came out in the 90s.
They got some real good stuff now, too.
That I just feel like, as much as like the stuff looks more detailed now, it's not as fun to collect them as it was back then.
You think it's because...
Well, because first of all, you can cheat. So if you're going to collect the toys and you don't have the toy that you need, you just go online and you buy it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the thrill of I used to leave UMass Dartmouth and I would hit the toy store on my way home to see like what they had that I didn't have, because I used to collect the wrestler figures too.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So it's like, maybe they have something that I don't have.
Yeah.
And I would go there and I would get it. And I built this massive collection that I thought was an investment. And what does it turn into? Something I put out on the table at a yard sale 10 years later.
See, yeah, when it comes to toys, I don't think I ever looked at them as cards, baseball cards. Those I looked at as an investment. I mean, I loved them too.
But I also, like I said, I collected them. I looked at them as an investment, but I also wouldn't leave them in the blister pack. I opened them.
Yeah, and that's where, if you're going to do that,
right.
You can't.
I needed to have them on the shelf as a display. You needed to have the Deadpool figure there that you could pick up if you wanted to.
That's right. I have a Deadpool one too. I have him set up on like my books at home. Like I have this little the pocket-sized Dracula book. He sits on that like a total douche. The only
action figures that I still have that are in my house, like I probably have like a bunch in my basement or something. I have the whole first season, the whole first series of Simpsons stuff that came out from Playmates. And it was play sets and figures and everything. I have all of it.
That's got to be worth something.
I would think so. But I even have like Main Street of Springfield with all these different it's.
Oh.
I spent some serious time collecting that just because it was something to do.
Uh-huh.
And but the only 2 action figures that I have like in my house are a Mulder and Scully.
Really?
From the X-Files movie. Yeah, I have them on a shelf in my office at home.
Wouldn't have guessed that one in a million years.
Other than that, nothing else.
Although I guess it kind of makes sense based on what you do and what your passion is now. Going back to my list, I got 2 more. Or no, I got 3 more. You should have 4 more.
I think I have 5 more.
5 more?
Yep.
How do you have 5 more? Well, whatever. Who cares? Why don't you give me another one then?
Well, I'll combine 2.
Okay.
So Marvel Tales, which was a reprint series that reprinted old comics.
They're still doing that.
Wasn't like it is now though, where you could just go and find the old issues online or even go to the comic book store and they had them all hanging up on the wall or everything. Like you wouldn't be able to find these old comics. The key the Touchstone issues, that you needed to have, you'd find those.
Uh-huh.
But you couldn't find all the little mini stuff in the middle of the run. So Marvel Tales was great because they would take some of those and reprint them so that you could kind of catch up with some of those stories, or at least know where some of these later things would have originally originated from. But that wasn't my favorite part of Marvel Tales in the 80s.
Okay.
In the back of the Marvel Tales, that's where they ran Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, which I loved.
Okay.
I love that tongue-in-cheek sensibility, and I loved all the different ways they would parody the...
That's where he started?
Yep. They ran them in Marvel Tales.
I didn't know that.
And it was designed as a way, when Marvel Tales wasn't a great selling comic, it was, if we put these fresh stories in there, then people will buy these reprints of old issues.
It's amazing how that works sometimes.
So I'll combine Marvel Tales with also one of my other favorites, Marvel Team Up.
You've told me about those before.
Which was, to me, I mean, I know they had the Brave and the Bold series in DC where they would bring the heroes together, but it was still, for some reason, maybe it was because of the proliferation of the Super Friends cartoon, that the Brave and the Bold didn't really resonate with me. I was like, yeah, I've seen the Flash and Superman work together before. But with Marvel Tales, you saw people that would never cross over working with each other. And they would be thrown into situations where they had to work together, and there was tension between them as much as there was team up between them. So it was a lot of fun to read those, and knowing, again, it was a one shot.
Yeah.
So every single time you read it didn't matter toward the rest of the storylines for either character.
So real quick aside on all this, we're going through ones now that I'd recommend to someone who's probably, like a teenager to, anybody older than that interested in getting into comics. If I was to give one to like a parent who's like, what's a good one now or that came out not too long ago that I could get to my kids? I really, I read this as an adult, but Scotty Young's run with Rocket and Groot, and I think he did some, like, there's Rocket and then there's Groot and then there's Rocket and Groot, but then there's like this whole thing where it's just like you got them all mixed together. I really enjoyed his Rocket, and I really enjoyed both of them together, and it was just very light. So I would look for those trades that are out there. It's an easy read. Look, I enjoyed it. I am a child, don't get me wrong, but it does feel like it's not for kids, but I see how it could be for kids too. It's not like edgy or anything like that. It's just mostly funny. But anyways, going back to my list, I would say, so I'm going to bring it back. You know what? No, I'm going to save that one for last because that's a really good one. So I'm going to go next to Old Man Logan. So I know that they had a run now in Marvel where they bring him back and he's like from a different universe, but there's the original like 6-issue series or whatever it was where he's dealing with the Hulks, like the family and all this stuff. The world is total dystopia. As far as we knew, that was mainstream continuity, Wolverine, not this crap that we hear about it now. I would read it like that. I read it as that, like that's how it was presented to me, just because the other stuff hadn't come up yet. And it's Wolverine, obviously Logan. It's different than, like the character is similar in how he acts in Logan, but there's different stuff going on. And I would say it's a little bit more miserable. I would say like he's a little bit more miserable just because he's gone through a lot of crap in the course of that story. Prior to you learn about it, most of the stuff, a good portion of it, I would say, but it's very I've yet to meet a person who didn't like the original Old Man Logan. The newer stuff, like I'm not in on that. You're not gonna get me to read that. And I don't and honestly, I like Wolverine quite a bit, but I don't know. I don't read a ton of Wolverine. I'm more inclined to read like X-23, to be honest. Right, and I think a lot of people are. Wolverine's become so ubiquitous and kind of oversaturated that I think a lot of people kind of feel the same way. Yeah, and there's not, a ton of. They like him being around, but they don't want to delve into just his world. Yeah. There's only so much to it. The thing is, there's only so much to his world. That's what it comes down to. He's a killing machine. That's what he is. It's not like Batman and Spider-Man where there's a lot more depth. There's some. But there's depth, but there's not as much. I feel like they've gone there. There's still they had the Wolverine podcast, and I really like. Actually, that was something I should have mentioned it on my mind. They had the second series of that, and they made a comic off of the first series. I had never read it. I'd like to at some point, but yeah, there's stuff there, Tim. And they have. You know what? I'm actually thinking about it more now after I said it. There are still spinoffs of Wolverine, but you want to get into some Wolverine? Like read the original miniseries from, what was it, 80, 81? It was like 4 issues. Read that. Okay. That's Wolverine when he was an animal. More animal than he was human. I will, we were talking before about multiple books and how it kind of confuses and muddies the waters. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites of all time will always be Web of Spider-Man, because it came out in 1985 when I was already back into reading comics at a time when I could get into it from the ground floor. And I could buy Web of Spider-Man 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and not have to go back and, miss a bunch of stuff or,
when they would do the little box where it would have a star and it would be like, see issue 57, editor. You know, I didn't have to worry about that because I was in on the ground floor.
Right.
It didn't take long, though, before it started weaving in, no pun intended, with all the other Spider-Man titles. So I think at that time it was Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, and then Spectacular Spider-Man.
Okay.
Spectacular Spider-Man was probably my favorite of all of them. But Web of Spider-Man, I was very excited to be able to kind of hold in my hands an issue number 1.
And when it came out. Yeah, I can see that's huge when you can get there at the start. Like, that's one thing I like about Rebirth so much is a lot of these I've been able to get in close to the beginning and catch up fairly quickly. But it's, because it just gets so, I don't understand it. Are there people actually out, like, you were saying you did it, where you started in on a series, then you would start at issue 175, and then you just keep going from there. You wouldn't be able to go back and read all the other stuff. Like, I can't imagine that. I think that's something that I had trouble dealing with early on as well, where you I need to start at the beginning, because if it's like, refer back to issue 100 and I'm on 175, it's how am I going to get back there? Like, back then you didn't have the accessibility you have now. You didn't have the trades in the same capacity that you do now. Which is why, again, I'm holding off on a certain one, but I brought up Dark Knight's Metal as, that's a spinoff that's like this is crazy world-ending thing, and it's all calamity and stuff. And I know the New Age of Heroes were birthed out of that, but it's not complicated. There are 3 trades now that are, is it 3? There are 3 trades that come with it. I would say you really only have to read one. But there's the Dark Knight's Metal, then there's the Dark Knight's Metal where it's like a group of heroes and villains working together. It's like Croc, I forget the title of it, but it's like Croc, Harley Quinn, Green Arrow's in there, Nightwing's in there, and I think Robin, Damian Wayne, I think all those characters are working together and like trying to get to Batman or whatever it is. And then there's also a spinoff where it's all the one-offs of each Dark Knight. And that's like Batman and how he became paired with Wonder Woman's powers, and then there's Doomsday's powers because Superman, and then there's Flash, was it Red Death? So there's all of these different things. That one's cool. I would say the only reason you have to get that is because you want to see the origin of, what's his name? The Batman Who Laughs. But outside of that, you could just read Dark Knight's Metal. I know someone was asking me about it the other day. You could just read that alone. And again, Batman screwed from the start. In one of those few moments I've ever been like, this is why I have such appreciation for the Batman Who Laughs. Like, I don't know how the hell you guys are going to figure this out. Like, it's almost like one thing has to happen, but there's no way the hell that they would ever do it, and it does happen. They're just that's one thing that's just so awesome about that character is he brings out something in Batman, a level of desperation that you've never seen before. So Dark Knight's Metal, another one to spin off. The last one I have, though, I will say, is a series. But I'm not going to get there yet. You got to go first.
All right. My last one is the original black and white Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from Mirage Comics.
So that was Eastman?
Eastman and Laird.
Okay.
So that's kind of what really got me back into comics. When my friend Luke was reintroducing me to comics, that was the one that really resonated with me.
Okay.
He would draw the Ninja Turtles. And he would tell me about them, and I'm like, who are these guys? And he would explain it to me, like who they were and what they were all about. And he's like, oh, they're a couple of guys from New Hampshire that created this. And I was like, what? Like,
I didn't
New
know
Hampshire,
that.
like next to Massachusetts?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they used to sell the comics out of, they had like a factory building where they worked, and you used to be able to go and buy the comics from them directly.
Really?
Yeah, and so I was very...
Another cartoon that we don't give enough love on this show, in all honesty.
Well, this is pre-cartoon.
No, I know. I recognize that. I'm just saying in general.
If you've ever seen the original Ninja Turtles, it wasn't like they were in the cartoon.
No, not at all, man.
First, they were much darker, much more badass. They all wore the same color bandana,
which I want to ask you about in a minute.
And so, but they were a different character than they were in the comic. Then the cartoon. Then the cartoon series comes out maybe a year or two after I started reading the comics, and for the first time in my life, I was like, I was on the ground floor of something. I knew about something before anybody else did. That's kind of cool.
That's really on the ground floor. Yeah, that is cool.
And at first, I kind of railed against it because the Ninja Turtles cartoon originally, they had a 5-episode miniseries that came out first to kind of test the waters to see if people would buy into it as a regular series. And when I watched it, I was like, oh, they really kind of cartooned up the Ninja Turtles. But then by the time the full series came out, I was all in.
Yeah, so let me ask you, when it comes, because I'm reading right now. You know, I don't want to spoil that for anybody, but I didn't realize initially that they didn't all have the different color bandanas,
Right?
Or is that what you call them? I guess.
I guess so, even though it goes over their eyes.
Yeah. Anyways, I didn't realize that the ninja wraps, they didn't always have
ninja rap. Go ninja, go. Oh, that's a different ninja rap.
I didn't realize they didn't have different colors originally.
Right.
So how the frig could you tell the difference?
It was a black and white comic.
Yeah.
So like you told them apart by their personalities. I do believe, if I remember right, they had the first letter of their name on their belt.
Okay.
I do think that they had those. And then, of course, you could tell them apart by their weapons.
Yeah, the weapons definitely for sure.
But that's how it was.
That's it, though.
And the personalities, I didn't think were really that different in those original black and white comics either, if I remember right.
Okay.
You know, you certainly didn't have, pizza-loving Michelangelo, and, like every character was like Raphael.
Oh.
Like this, not even cartoon Raphael, like movie Raphael, where he was like this brooding, darker character. They were all kind of like that.
Okay. So is Raph your favorite?
No, he's my least favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
So when I was a kid, my favorite was Michelangelo. Mm-hmm. But as I've gotten,
told me that
as I've gotten older, I've appreciated Leonardo more.
Really? I don't think I've ever met someone whose favorite character is Leonardo. I think my brother's was Donatello. Mine was Mikey. Wes's Raph?
Probably. My favorite character from that universe is Casey Jones.
Oh yeah, Casey Jones is awesome.
I just always liked the fact that he was like, a badass at.
Use a hockey stick.
Didn't like the Ninja Turtles at all. And one of my favorite actors actually played Casey Jones in the first Ninja Turtles live-action movie.
What was his name again?
Elias Koteas.
Okay. And now, did he ever get a spin-off series, like the comics?
Yeah.
Casey?
Yeah.
Was it any good ever?
Every character in the Ninja Turtles universe got spin-offs.
I mean, I remember reading a Bebop and Rocksteady spin-off. God, that was a year ago.
There was
not that great.
I think Genghis Frog had his own series for a while. Usagi Yojimbo had his own.
Yeah.
There was the Metal Turtle. I think he had his own comic for a while. I mean, there's
an ongoing miniseries with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Batman, and I don't think there is not. I think there was an issue out last week, or it was 2 weeks ago.
I believe they're coming out with a cartoon series about it.
They have the movie that came out.
Okay.
I haven't seen it yet. I don't know. How is that not on the DC Universe app? Isn't that something that should be there? I mean, it's like a Nickelodeon thing, I guess, but...
Yeah, I think that's the issue, is who owns the rights to the Ninja Turtles.
Okay, well, DC doesn't, but I mean, you're going to loan Batman out like that and not... I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, the comic, from the sounds of it, is different than the show. I'm sure the show is awesome and everything, but there have been 3 miniseries with it, and... The first 2, I'm not done with the third one yet, so we'll see. But the first 2 have to do they know about each other by the second one. But it's fun, it's light. That's another one that I think anybody can enjoy, and it includes kids. It doesn't, and I like who's the artist? Is that Freddie Williams? I think, and then Freddie Williams the second, and then James Tynion the fourth. You can't be like the first of your name if you're going to be involved in that book. And actually, Kevin Eastman is involved in the third one that's ongoing right now.
Yeah, I know that they were kind of out of it for a while, right? Mm-hmm. Like for a long, long time.
I think so, yeah. But either way, that one is I recommend. And those are miniseries, and even the second one, you don't have to read the first one. You just got to know they know each other exists. In the first one, that's not necessarily the case, and it's fun. I really enjoy that art too.
I'm trying to remember what it was, and I'm looking it up here, and I'm not seeing it. I guess I could fall down this rabbit hole for a while, but if I remember right, there was a Batman graphic novel in the 80s where it was Batman Versus, and it was against another character from another company.
Well, they've had a couple crossovers. This is not the first time they've ever crossed over.
But I'm trying to remember what the first one was. Was it a Batman versus Daredevil?
Might have been. He's fought the Hulk before.
I'm trying to remember which one it was that was like the first one, and I was like, wait, they can cross universes?
It is pretty cool when they do stuff like that. We may never see that again.
Well, I mean, no, now we may, because they all just keep buying, other properties. One buys another, buys another. So.
Well, I mean, we may never see Marvel versus DC again. That may never happen. I would love to see them do a crossover now. But anyway, my last one is Christopher Priest's Deathstroke. So that's like starts at Rebirth and then to what's now. I mean, he's going to be done, though, at issue 50, I believe. I'm not certain. I mean, you're writing 50 issues of a character. That's, 12 issues a year, not counting annuals. So that's, so if you count the annual mixed in there, that's 12 a year. Man, that's a few years. That is a while with one character. And, oh, my God. Little bit recently, I've had my doubts with some of the decisions he's made, but then last issue, I was like, nah, you can't doubt Christopher Priest. I never really cared much for Deathstroke prior to, and I mean, we all know this, Tim. I mean, I'd be stunned if anybody really thinks differently about this than me, but you can have someone recommend you a book like I recommended you Red Hood, and that's why you read him. But if you're picking one up off the shelf, you're picking it up off the shelf because of the art. Never the name, unless you already knew the character from somewhere else, right? It's never that, or never because of the writer.
Well,
maybe now, but as a kid, it was always the art.
I mean, sometimes the title of the book drew my interest.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just the title alone.
Yeah, depending on something, depending on what it was. Hellblazer being one. Mm-hmm. You don't know what it is, but you're like, that sounds cool.
It does sound cool.
Especially if it's some of the...
Constantine's name is pretty sick, I will say. Like, that was...
The more obscure ones, especially like older, like EC comics, like, Tales from the Crypt and things like that. Mm. Like those kind of, like when you look at it, you're like, oh, that sounds like something I'd want to read. Conversely, like... Nick Fury and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I would not read that book. Like, the title doesn't grab me.
So there are certain... But I generally look at it, and I got, I got wiser as I got older. I looked at it as, that's the art that I'm going to see in this book. I got to at least give it a try. Now you get, like, Tyler Kirkham, who exclusively does covers. He does. Very rarely see him do...
I grew up in a different era where the art on the cover... didn't necessarily match the art on the inside.
Yeah, I didn't realize. There are still times where it matches. You didn't grow up in a different era. It's just I was a dumb kid who didn't recognize it right away. And I'd be like, why is this different? How did this happen? And I just wouldn't read who the people were that were drawing and writing and stuff. But as I got older, but still, that's the stuff that would draw me in. And now I know, like, okay, who's writing it, who drew it. If I know, like, there are certain artists who I don't mind, but I'm not a big fan of. Like, there are some, like Otto Schmidt. I loved Otto Schmidt's Green Arrow. If I saw that he was drawing Red Hood, I'd be like, I don't want any part of that. I mean, like, I would still read it because it's Red Hood, but. Like, I'm not going to be pleased with that. Like, it's... But anyway, with Deathstroke, that's a character who I don't even know. There have been a few artists, I think, drawing him over the years. But the thing is, with Deathstroke, Chris Priest has found a way to take a character who has, like, no emotion, no nothing, whatever. He's just a stone-cold assassin, and turn him into something more. Now, sometimes... I'd like him to be, that stone cold killer Deathstroke that I'm used to, but for the most part, he's got that perfect mix, and it's just enough where it's like, is he gonna go and do this? No, he's not. Yes, he is. No, and he leaves you guessing. And though his writing style is very different too, it's kind of like that movie Vantage Point, but like actually good. And it doesn't jump around too much, but you have Deathstroke, you have his son Jericho, you have the daughter Rose Wilson, who are all prominent characters in the course of it. And I don't think there's ever been Deathstroke done quite as well as Christopher Priest, and I'm very worried. I am legitimately worried who's going to handle the title next, because I just haven't seen someone. I read the New 52 stuff. I couldn't tell you who wrote it, and there was some older stuff too that I've read, and it's like, okay. I also love his icon suit look. The one now, I don't know if you've seen it, Tim, but
No.
He's not as big and clunky. I mean, but that's just me. I don't like big and clunky as much. So, Death. If I was to tell anybody to pick up a trade now of an ongoing series, as much as I love Red Hood, I know I said New 52, and that's still great, and I love the stuff now. But objectively, I do think Christopher Priest's Deathstroke is the best ongoing stuff out there at this stage. So yeah, but I think when it comes down to it, Tim, it's just these other little things introduce me to characters, or now put me, like, they help me realize, oh, this is who the writer is, this is who the author is, and I find that I'm on. I take more notice to who's involved in these series as opposed to the ongoing ones. It's just easier to jump in on. I'm not going to go and read Detective Comics. Like, I read 1000. Obviously, it's a big deal, but I'm not going to go and read. Go and try and start up with that because it's been going on forever. So I take value in the White Knight, the Metal, the Last Night on Earth, which is DC's Black Label that's going on right now. So that's why it just naturally goes. I mean, because I read a ton of titles, ongoing stuff. I find it hard. It's hard to recommend those necessarily to people. You know what I mean?
And the problem with any time you recommend something to somebody too, like,
you got to know them.
It's not only knowing them, but you're also letting them know something about you that you may not necessarily want them to know.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Like when I was a kid, we could all recommend the Punisher to each other.
Yeah.
Because like he was a badass and he was a new character and he was showing up everywhere. But like if you were no TV show, let's pretend the TV show never happened on the Netflix show, and you were just to go up to somebody and be like, "Hey, have I got a comic for you to check out? It's called The Punisher. It's about a guy that just goes around killing everybody."
Yeah.
You'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
See something, say something. So you kind of have to be careful about what you want people to infer from you based on what it is that you're recommending.
Yeah, as a kid, you just don't you don't think about it. Like, it's just whatever.
And as a kid, it's like whatever's badass.
Yeah.
This guy's badass, you're gonna like it because it's badass.
Yes. Now it's like there's just so much stuff out there, and parents get involved. It's like, oh, this is really violent. I mean, I'm sure there was always like that, but I don't know. My parents, as much as my parents could be very hands-on with things, they just never, like, when it came to this crap, it's like, it's just cartoons and video games and, artwork. I mean, it's not like, it's clearly not real. My kids know that. Like, I make sure they know it's not real. But that is, yeah, like now, I've recommended Red Hood 15 times over to people, but when I talk to somebody who's like an older fan who knows Jason Todd for what he was when he was Robin, they're like, Nick, you cannot tell me you like Jason Todd.
That's the way I reacted.
Exactly, it's exactly how you reacted. It's like, people know who I am, and they're like, how can you like this character? He was such a whiny little pain in the ass when he was a kid, and he was. I've read this stuff when he was a kid. Oh, so annoying. But like, that's not what he is now. It's not at all what he is. He's a punk, and he can piss off Batman more than anybody, but like, he's a badass at the end of the day. He is a badass more than Batman, I would say, at this stage in the game. But anyway, real quick for my out of mind, I don't know if you have anything, Tim, but the one thing that I want to say is Peaky Blinders. Somebody let me know this the other day. It is available, season 4 on Netflix. Awesome show. If you haven't watched it from the beginning, obviously, I'm not going to tell you to go and jump in on season 4, but it is a very good show. Cillian Murphy's in it, who many know, who listen to the show, know as Scarecrow from Batman Begins. He's also in 28 Days Later. That's the first one, right? 28 Days Later?
Yeah.
And then 28 Weeks Later is the other one. He's the main character in that as well. Tom Hardy is in this show as well at certain points. You need to watch it with subtitles. I tried doing it from the beginning. I know that sounds miserable, the idea of that at first. Trust me.
No, I think Netflix has made people less hesitant about subtitles.
Okay, I don't watch a ton of shows with subtitles, but this one, they're still speaking English. It's just that they have the really, really thick British accents, and then you just need it to glance once in a while. You'll be fine. Just double check. Like, there's one word every sentence where it's like, huh? That's it. But I highly recommend that show.
Well, I've got something that I think you'll appreciate and you will like. It's the you're gonna just have to go no theme song to close it out.
That's fine.
The Ken Burns documentary about country music on PBS. Now, you know how I feel about modern country music.
Yep.
We've had this discussion many times.
For sure.
But I've always been a fan of the older stuff, the Americana aspect of it. And this documentary series is incredible. I mean, it's a Ken Burns, so you know it's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that you've probably seen Ken Burns baseball.
I've seen parts of it. It's a little exhausting for me.
But you get the idea of what it's about, and so it's really fascinating.
Be more open to a country one than baseball.
To go back and to see like how it all started to come together is something that wasn't really a marketable thing in the early days.
I just realized what time it was.
Yeah, I know you're killing me here.
I'm sorry. Why didn't you say anything?
It's all right.
You got to give me a signal. I had no idea. I'm like looking at the time, and I'm like, wait a minute.
For those who wonder why I'd be trying to rush through it, I have to host another radio show tonight at midnight and again tomorrow night. And I'm in the process of trying to write a TV show that's due Wednesday morning.
Oh.
So I'm doing that around like all this other stuff and all that. So I don't mean to be pushy.
Wes will be back next week, and we will let you guys know when the show starts then what we're going to talk about. Have a great week, everybody.